Hello and welcome to this week's edition of the City Update. I'm your host Mark Aaron, Multimedia Design Manager for the City of Danville. On this week's episode, we are going to discuss the 2012 fiscal year proposed Danville City budget. City Manager Joe King presented the proposed budget to Danville City Council back in April. They will spend the next month debating and discussing this budget before they pass a finalized budget in June. Now, over the next month, you at home will have ample opportunity to voice your opinions about the budget. We have set up 4 public hearings that will take place during the month of May, 2 during regular City Council meetings. 1 will actually be set up as a standalone public hearing just for the city budget. Now, on today's show, we will give you all the information you need to know about those public hearings and discuss the Danville City budget in much more detail. Now, joining me today as my guest is the City Manager for the City of Danville, Joe King. And Joe, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Mark.
And Joe, as I mentioned there in my intro, we are doing as much as we can to get the public involved in the budget process this year. I mentioned we've set up 4 public hearings, and I wanted you to give them some insight into the importance of the public involvement and what they can do to get involved and when those public hearings will take place.
Okay, as you mentioned, we'll have 4 scheduled, and 3 of those are around regular council meetings. And so next Tuesday, May the 3rd, there's a public hearing that will be open for general comment on the budget and then specific comment on the proposed school budget.
Okay.
Then on the 12th, we have a dedicated meeting just for the purpose of hearing public comment. And then on the 17th, which is back on a Tuesday, is another hearing. And then the final hearing will be the first meeting in June, which is the 7th of June, I believe. And I want to make sure people understand that the opportunity for input is not limited to a public hearing. Right. Not everybody finds it convenient to come and speak at a public hearing, and some are uncomfortable doing so. Mm-hmm. And so we have the good old-fashioned personal contact modes on our city website, our email addresses and contact information for all the council members, and they can be contacted individually. We are happy to receive comments at the city manager's office, and we pass those on to the city council. And we receive, as does the council, comments from people in person, by telephone, by email, or by regular mail.
Right.
So those are just as important as coming and providing comment at a public hearing. So we're trying to make sure there are opportunities for anybody that are convenient to everyone. Right.
And I know members of your staff have done a great job with our website, providing a budget analysis. You can go on there and you can even submit comments on our website, danville-va.gov.
That's right. And the budget, it's a little bit intimidating.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
A lot of information. There's an operating budget and a capital improvements budget. Those are available in the library.
Okay.
If people want to look at a hard copy, they're available on the website, so you can open them up or download them from the website. So I think anybody that's interested has ample opportunity to get their hands on a budget or get it digitally.
Absolutely. And I know we will be broadcasting all of the public hearings live here on River City TV as part of the regular City Council meetings, and we will broadcast live the special public hearing that will be held on Thursday, May 12th as well. So, well, Joe, let's get into the budget a little bit. And before we do that, I know you mentioned in your summary that you gave to Council this has really been one of the toughest budget seasons we've had in quite some time, hasn't it?
It has, and you know, ever since Danville started its economic downturn with the loss of major industries, budgets have always been tough.
Right.
But the last couple of years, and this year in particular, on top of that, of course, we've had the impact of the national or global recession, and that affects businesses in Danville just like it does anywhere else. So we've seen a loss of consumer-based revenues like sales tax and meals tax, lodging taxes, little growth, not anything like the kind of growth you'd expect year after year.
Right.
And then we get a substantial amount of money from the state, like every other city in Virginia, and the state, struggling with its budget challenges, has reduced the amount of funding that it's giving to local governments. So those things are like piled on top of each other, makes it a very difficult year.
And I know not only are you proposing for this year, but you're looking to years ahead as well. Because if we keep seeing the revenues and expenditures spread apart, I think you all have a graph in the budget there. Within 4 or 5 years, you're looking at a $10 million difference there in revenues versus expenditures.
Right. We have deficits as far as the eye can see.
Right.
And so just like in your family budget, or if you listen to the news, the national or the state budget, it's all a matter of coming to grips with what should the city do and how should it do it. And I know people depend on us to make sure we do things as efficiently as possible. But the budget is really a summation of hundreds of decisions, some of which are made by me and the administration, some by the city council, and oftentimes over many years on what services are provided, what levels of service, what programs are provided. And we're at a point, given the reduced revenues that we're getting, of having to make some tough decisions, and it's very important that we know accurately, looking ahead, what does not just this budget look like, but the next and the next, and we have a 5-year sort of view, and we realize that if we don't reduce the size of our operations and scale back on what we try to do, that we're going to see very significant budget deficits. And unlike the federal government, local governments cannot operate on an imbalance. You have to figure out a way to generate either the revenue you need or the cuts necessary, or a combination of both, to fully fund the budget.
And our departments, through your leadership, has really taken a hard look at every line item in their budget and ways to save, this year more than others, per se.
That's right. And we have a huge budget. It's $247 million, and that's in large part because we operate some utilities as well as the general government. And so it's understandable the citizen can scratch his head and wonder, isn't there more you could cut? And there is. But we're at a point now where the significant cuts we could make, and some would argue need to make, if you're looking forward, need to be not just of the nature that will work one year, but they need to work ongoing. So we're talking about structural cuts, not just putting off something, but changing the way we do business.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the numbers. You mentioned the total budget appropriations, about $247 million. That includes the general fund, which is basically our operating budget. Then we have our utility fund, which is wastewater, water, sewer, water and gas. And then we have some enterprise funds as well, which make up, I guess, the balance about $150 million. Is that correct? Now, when we look at appropriations for the general fund, because we're going to focus on the general fund, because when we talk about operating budget, that's what we're discussing. We talk about appropriations for that. We're looking at, I guess, the school system and public safety take up a large chunk of those appropriations.
That's right.
About almost half.
That's right.
Now, and I know when we come to funding our Danville public school system, I know we really fund that over and above and beyond what the state mandates. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Yeah.
It's about twice what the state mandates, and that represents a commitment the city has made for decades now in supporting public education. And every community needs a good public school system. I say Danville is a small city that has big city problems. And when you have the kind of problems we have in Danville with a large segment of the community in having low income, high degrees of poverty, loss of population, those kinds of things, what you're seeing there is really characteristics of a big old city that's in decline. We're trying to turn that around, but we desperately need the strongest, highest quality public education system we can afford, and Danville has stepped up to the plate and funded twice what the state requires.
And we have a pie chart there on the screen for our viewers so they can get a visual breakdown of the appropriations.
As far as transfers into the general fund, the biggest examples of those are from the utility funds.
Okay.
And like every city in Virginia that has an electric distribution system, a certain amount of the revenue generated goes back to the city's general fund as a part of the earnings that the owners realize through an enterprise like that. And in addition to electric, of course, we have natural gas, water, wastewater, and a small telecommunications firm enterprise. But to balance next year's budget and to pay for the increased costs in health care coverage for our employees, we have transferred a $1.5 million allocation from a reserve, a special reserve we have for our insurance program, and that's there to level out from during the year to make sure we can pay all the claims we have for health insurance. There is the ability in this one time to transfer that in as well, and that's helping balance next year's budget.
Okay. And when we look at other general fund revenue generators, I guess property tax make up a large chunk of that, about 25%. And then there on the pie graph, they can see that other local taxes make up about 21%.
Right.
Can you give them a little better understanding of
Other
what's in those
local taxes include sales tax,
Okay.
meals tax, lodging taxes, business licenses, permits, that kind of thing.
Okay, great. Well, Joe, we're going to have to take a quick break, but when we come back from break, I do want to outline three major important priorities that you have given during this budget, and we'll outline those in much more detail when we come back from break. So stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Driver's license registration, please, man.
Are you aware that it is a criminal offense to accelerate past a stopped emergency vehicle? Hello, I'm Corporal T.B. Scarce of the Danville Police Department, and every day our officers engage in tasks that involve your safety. Well, now it's your turn. When you encounter a stopped police or other emergency vehicle, remember to slow down and change lanes whenever possible. If it is unsafe to change lanes, please remember to watch your speed. Committed to your safety, the Danville Police Department asks for your help as we strive to make our streets a safer place to travel.
Welcome back to this week's edition of the City Update. I'm your host, Mark Aaron, Multimedia Design Manager for the City of Danville. Joining me this week is our City Manager, Joe King, and we are discussing the proposed fiscal year 2012 city budget here in the City of Danville. And Joe, as I mentioned when we went to break, there are three main priorities that you have put forth here in this budget that you have proposed to Danville City Council, and I want to touch on those in much more detail on today's show. And one of those being right-sizing our city government. You have talked in detail about this before, but can you give us an overview of, in your mind, what do we need to do to right-size our government operations here in the City of Danville?
Just like any organization, business, or public sector organization, you need to make sure that you're not just complacent and allow your organization to wallow through one year after the next. And we're determined that over a period of time, we've said over a 3-year period, that we're going to very methodically try to downsize our organization, not to the extent that we're not doing what is absolutely necessary to protect the public and provide service, but to try to reduce the cost of our operation. The biggest factor in city government operations is employees. So we're talking about reducing the number of employees we have. And once we establish what I would consider the right size, then we're going to try to be constantly diligent about making sure that our efficiency is at its highest level, so that we can honestly say we're giving the citizens of Danville the best bargain for their tax dollars. Now, when you look at state studies, I think we can take pride in the fact that we're way down on the list compared to other cities in the state in terms of how much we cost taxpayers to perform municipal functions. So we're on the right side of the scale already, but we're determined to be known for being very efficient and effective in our operations. So I want to make sure before we talk about doing things that cost more money that we're focused on doing what we can to cost less in our day in and day out operation.
And some of the things you're looking at now, the transition from backyard refuse pickup to curbside.
Right. There are 3 service levels we're talking about, in addition to hundreds of budget cuts that we've made and things that people would expect us to cut.
Right.
We're talking about 3 service areas. One is the solid waste collection, moving from the back door, backyard to the curb. About half of our customers do this anyway,
right.
And it's interesting that many assume that's the only mode of operation we have, but
right.
we need to move from the back door to the curb across the board so that we can reduce the cost of that operation. And that is not a part of the general fund. It's a separate funding to charge separately, but we don't want to be looking at increases in those rates. Right. The second cut that is being proposed has to do with the library. And we have one branch library that was established back during the annexation 30 years or so ago. Then that was a commitment the city made to serve the newly annexed citizens. And I believe it's time now to close that branch and consolidate our operations in the downtown library, the main library. And for a city of 43,000, having a branch library is just one of those things that is heading us the opposite direction from downsizing and right-sizing.
Right. And you mentioned that was part of annexation, because
right.
I know I've heard some rumbles in the community about we're required as a part of that
right.
annexation to have a branch library, but that's not correct, right?
We committed to establish a branch library,
right? Okay.
And there's no requirement to keep it in perpetuity.
Okay.
And
right.
it's not a big budget savings, and it's interesting that people are suggesting, well, there's got to be another way to save the money. The point is, it's an indication of the path we need to be heading on in downsizing. And we're going to be looking at every aspect of our operation. We have facilities, distributed facilities in the community centers, that kind of thing that we're going to be looking at. And we'd like for people to come downtown.
Absolutely.
So part of the objective of focusing in the downtown library is to help support the downtown. And I want to make sure that I point out that for somebody that makes use of a facility like the Westover Branch Library, that is an important part of their quality of life. And so to close that requires a big sacrifice on their part, and I don't minimize that. But that's one small step toward downsizing and right-sizing that I think we need to take. And then the third area is to reduce and refocus our tourism program. In recent years, we've had just what I consider to be an intelligent but a traditional tourism marketing program, and we think we can reduce the cost of the program and focus on special events promotions. And a great example of that was the Duke rugby tournament a couple weekends ago, and trying to make the most out of an event like that, VIR events, Martinsville Speedway events, that kind of thing, and try to stimulate through festivals and outside events. Interest in staying in Danville, spending money in Danville is where we need to focus our tourism program and reduce the amount we spend on tourism and put those scarce resources into basic municipal services so that we can minimize the impact on the tax rate.
Right. Well, I know another area we want to focus on that has become a huge issue here in the city of Danville is blight. And I know over this 3-year period you'd like to implement a blight eradication program. Can you talk a little bit about the funding that will go towards that?
Yes. There are 2 special initiatives proposed. One has to do with blight eradication, and the other has to do with economic development, or specifically creating more industrial sites for new industries we recruit into Danville. And those are separate but somewhat related issues. If you look at it in Danville's challenge, really what we need to do is provide everybody the means for meaningful family wage jobs.
Right.
We have a large unemployment rate. We have people that are struggling to make a transition from the old industry to the new economy. And that's got to be priority number one. So attracting people in our jobs to the community and building jobs in existing businesses is critical. We also want Danville to be a place of opportunity for people to be upwardly mobile. So improving their skills, abilities, making it possible to stay here in Danville but better themselves, not just get a job but better themselves. And then we need people to see Danville as a community of choice. So when we're recruiting industry in, the few people that they'll bring with them when a new industry comes in need to pick Danville as a place to live. And that requires that we have places for new industries to come, which we're running out of right now, and a community that's attractive and right down to the neighborhood level is safe and appealing. And blight is, in some parts of Danville, just sinking the boat here. I mean, we have poor quality of housing, we have old housing. Even citywide, we did a house-by-house, lot-by-lot survey and discovered that only 60% of the housing stock is in good condition. That means 40% is in bad or poor condition. And we have 2,000 houses that are abandoned. We have major blight in our downtown area. And my concern is that blight is hurting all of us. Even if you're in a stable neighborhood where there's no apparent blight, it hurts your chances to sell your house.
Right. There's a trickle-down effect.
It has a domino effect.
Yeah.
So eradicating blight and developing new industrial sites are the two initiatives. And to do that, we're proposing an increase in taxes that will, all of the revenues from the proposed taxes would go toward these two important initiatives next year, blight eradication and economic development. And it's quite important that we make not just a small dent in those problems, but a very large effort is needed.
And you talked about the tax increase. You've presented a couple of different options for City Council. Our viewers may have heard some of these, maybe a property tax increase or a cigarette tax. There's a couple different options on the table, correct?
Right. What I'm focusing on is an amount of revenue that would be equivalent to a 10-cent increase in the property tax rate. Our property tax rate is now 73 cents, so that would increase it to 83. If not that, a combination of that and other taxes perhaps, and we've suggested initiating a cigarette tax. Danville is one of the only cities in Virginia that does not have a cigarette tax. Increasing our meals tax. We could increase our lodging tax. Right now our lodging tax is one of the highest in the state, so I'd be a little reluctant to go there, but the combination of those, what we really need is an increase in operating revenue of about $2.2 million, which is equivalent to a 10-cent increase in property taxes.
And that 10% increase still puts us well below state average and below peer city averages here around the region.
That's correct. We compare ourselves with not just cities of similar size, but we also look at cities that have electric systems. And we are well below, on whatever comparison you want to make, we're well below the state average and our peer grouping. And just because we're below doesn't mean we ought to raise our taxes.
Right.
But as I mentioned, Danville is a small city with many big city problems. And it's a simple fact that we need the revenue to sustain our operations. That means employ the right people with the right skills, not no more or less, pay them no more or less than is appropriate for the value they bring to the organization to serve the public. But without that kind of sustainable revenue, we're not going to be able to maintain the quality of life that we're trying to maintain in Danville, keep it a safe and sound community, make it attractive not just to those of us who live here, but people we're trying to encourage to live here.
Well, Joe, I know we barely scratched the surface on this year's proposed budget, but I do want to let our citizens know that they will have ample opportunity to voice their opinions about this budget. As you can see there on the screen is a list of dates and times and locations of where public hearings will be held throughout the month of May, so you can do just that. And of course, you can log on to our website, danville-va.gov. You can submit questions online there and get a lot of more information about the city budget. And as the city manager mentioned at the beginning of the show, copies are available at the Danville Public Library on Patton Street right here in the heart of downtown Danville. And Joe, thank you so much for joining us today. We appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule to join us.
Thank you.
And thank you at home for watching. Until next week, have a great day.